Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Dr. Glenn is a clinical psychologist and former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leaving the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Before we get started, if you haven't downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with DefeatYourCravings.com, and I'm here with one of my favorite people, Kimberly, who was at first a reader and then a client and eventually hired her as a coach. How are you, Kimberly?
Good. How are you, Glenn?
I'm good. This is the third time we're trying to record this.
I know. All this new equipment. Yeah.
I'm starting to believe we might be cursed, but we're not cursed.
No, definitely not.
I kind of thought about the things that we said in those ill-fated recordings.
Mm-hmm.
And there were two major insights that I had from what you were saying, or two things I really want to be sure that we capture and get recorded and out on the airwaves. One of them had to do with your ability to refute the start tomorrow squeal. Hey, it's just as easy to start your silly diet tomorrow or start it on Monday.
Right. I think it's so common, that issue where, it's just easier to put things off that are difficult or they feel like they're going to be difficult. Yeah, that voice in your head that says, you can start over tomorrow. Just enjoy yourself today. Tomorrow you'll meet your goal. You'll start.
So I want to make sure we talk about that, how you refute that. And then I want to be sure that we talk about, I think the line you used was, surely my life is worth more than this food. Surely my ability to go to the beach and enjoy my kids.
Yeah, that's a big part of my big why, my reasons for wanting to stay trim and eat healthfully.
So maybe tell your story a little bit so that it'll make more sense in context, and we talk about both of those things.
Yeah, I'll give it to you in the brief. Basically, I grew up in a household where food was everything. Food was the only thing that was actually pleasant. Other than that, there was a lot of fighting and nonsense and mental health issues among my parents and siblings, and it was difficult. Everybody was a good cook, and actually I grew up in the restaurant business, so, food was definitely everything that was positive. So I was kind of a chubby kid, not a really chubby kid, kind of normal, a little on the chubby side, which, back in the 60s and 70s, I guess it's still going on, but, kids pick on each other and my siblings picked on me and that kind of thing. And so anyway, I discovered as a teenager that if I smoked cigarettes and drank Tab all day, I could keep weight off. And so I was a slender teen and I got married young. And then I had a baby when I was 22 and developed gestational diabetes, put on a ton of weight during the pregnancy, and have struggled with it ever since, losing 30 pounds, gaining it back, never meeting my goal. At one point, I was up to 250 pounds. I'm 5'6", so that was at least 100 pounds overweight. Got a little bit of that off and then kind of stabilized around 200 and could never really get much lower than that. And I was actually doing research for weight loss surgery. I had tried everything on the planet. I'd been on every commercial program imaginable, including using the drug Fen-Phen. Do you remember that when that was a thing?
I do.
Yeah, that ended up being kind of a scary thing where I ended up at a cardiologist and anyway, on and on.
One of the lucky ones though, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, where it didn't actually do damage, but I had to have testing done because I was getting tachycardia symptoms. But anyway, luckily it didn't actually damage me. But the thing that did actually damage me was diabetes. I ended up blind in my left eye. Luckily, a really good eye surgeon was able to fix that, but he cautioned me and said, if the right eye goes, you're going to be blind.
Wow. I didn't know that part.
Yeah, really dramatic, scary stuff was going on right around the time that I said, forget it, I'm just going to get weight loss surgery. Even though I'd done a ton of research on it and it did not seem like a good thing to do, I was desperate at that point. That's when I found your first book and I read it, and your approach seemed really unique to me. The one thing I hadn't tried was this.
Glad you're saying unique and not crazy,
Yeah, right, right. Well,
because I've heard a lot worse. So,
I'll tell you, that inner pig voice that we talk about that tries to shoot down every attempt and get you back into binging the way it wants you to. Oh my goodness, it attempted to pull apart your book too. Any even slightly editing errors, I would be like, oh, come on, this guy can't even write, you know? but at any rate, nope, I was able to defeat that. Nope, I'm not going there. I'm not, that's ridiculous. And so I decided to give it a try. And I started employing everything on my own, learning the techniques as best I could from reading the book and going back and trying to understand everything. And then I discovered the workbook that you had written. And that was really helpful because it gave me something to write in, like write all my thoughts down. And then I went from there and discovered the website and really got going. The biggest thing that I learned that was so important was how to refute. You're not talking back to that voice in your head. You're simply explaining to yourself why it's lying.
it's not a debate. You're not treating it as a logical equal. It's more like an operation where you're exposing its cancerous logic. And for example, how the idea that it would be just as easy to start tomorrow doesn't really work.
No, that was a pig squeal, as we call them, that came up over and over and over again for me. Because it had been my habit for years to frantically on Sunday evening write down the diet I was going to do or finish up some latest book or sign up for that program in order to start this amazing thing on Monday. And I think, the Monday diet start thing is something that a lot of chronic overeaters and chronic dieters are accustomed to. And of course, by Wednesday, I fell off the wagon, so to speak. And
How did you eventually come up with an answer to the idea that it would be just as easy to start tomorrow?
well, first, it was in understanding your techniques that I realized that this voice in my head was separate. It wasn't me deciding. It was something else that was deciding that I needed to fight.
By which you don't mean that you're schizophrenic.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
What you mean, Kimberly, just for the audience, what you mean is that you discovered it was helpful to separate the thoughts in your head that suggested that you should break your rules from the thoughts in your head that suggested that you should keep to them, and to separate them. And as a convenience, a way to wake up and have an emotional feeling about it, we called it the pig. You can call it your food monster, you can call it your goblin. Just it's got to be something that gives you a sense of, whoa, who's in charge here, and this is dangerous. So with that, you learned to refute the idea that you could start tomorrow. But what did you specifically tell it? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. I had so many different reputations for that particular squeal because it was such a common squeal. But the thing that I came up with that really nailed that piggy in its cage so that it would stop bothering me with that one was the concept that tomorrow never comes, the recognition that every day there's another tomorrow. You can start your diet tomorrow. Today, just enjoy yourself and eat whatever you want became, first off, I'm not enjoying myself. This is not fun to be overweight and to be ill. And secondly, I know you're going to say the same thing tomorrow. So why don't you wait until tomorrow is what I would say to the piggy. I would say, just for today, I'm going to stick with my diet and nourish myself properly and take care of my body and love myself and be kind to myself. Your binge, you're eating the junk food, that can wait until tomorrow.
Exactly. I'd like to add a couple of things to that for people who may be struggling with the same idea. There is research that says the more confident people are that they'll be able to start again tomorrow, the worse their overeating is, which suggests that the decision to start tomorrow is really just a decision to overeat today or to binge today. An emphasis on the idea that you can only ever use the present moment to be healthy because now is the only time you can put food in your mouth, right? And whenever you're going to eat, it's going to be now again. And so I tell people to flex their healthy eating now muscle as often as they can. And if you keep doing that, the future is an infinite string of nows. So you'll always eat healthy. Your healthy eating now muscle will get stronger and stronger and stronger.
And it gets easier and easier. Like at first, it's a little bit of a struggle and you've got that push me, pull me feeling, but then it gets easy. The more you do it, it gets easier and easier and easier. The more you live in the now when you're taking care of yourself, it does become an infinite string of nows because the struggle sort of eventually stops. It abates. It gets less and less and less.
Your reptilian brain, your survival drives, the energy that the pig was marshaling towards bags and boxes and containers and whatever else your poison happens to be. When it learns that panicked, oh my God, we have to have this now thought doesn't get reinforced, it doesn't want to waste energy. The brain is set up to be very efficient. And so if you teach it that you've got a set of rules and guidelines that you comply with, and that you don't make whimsical, emotional, spontaneous decisions to divert from those, then it will eventually leave you alone. It's like if a kid has a temper tantrum in a toy store and you only ever buy it a toy on Saturday, the kid will eventually stop having those temper tantrums during the week because it knows that that's a waste of energy.
And that's one of the things that I tell my clients a lot is, it will stop asking for what it never gets. It wouldn't occur to me to get up in the morning and say to my husband, hey, would you buy me a Lamborghini? Because I pretty much know that we can't afford that and that we're not going to get that. And so why would I ask for it? And that is exactly what that voice inside your head, it stops asking for what it never gets.
The other thing that I want people to know, it's a variation on what you said that the pig is going to say, start tomorrow again tomorrow. But what we think just before we eat something delicious is more likely to be repeated. Our brains are calorie, fat, nutrition finding machines. And so if there's a rich source of calories and you think, oh, the heck with it, I'll just start my diet tomorrow, then you've taught your brain that thinking I'll start tomorrow is a way to get that rich source of calories. And you'll be more likely, not that you're just going to do it tomorrow, you'll be more likely to think start tomorrow. And you'll be more likely to have the craving also. So I always tell people, look, if you're in a hole, you got to stop digging. And the solution is the same. Use the present moment to be healthy.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing that you said, and I've been taking notes on some of your conversation today. I'm going to go back to it in a minute. But the other thing you said, Kimberly, was when you said that your life must be worth more. Could you talk a little bit more about that moment? I remember very specifically something about the beach or...
Yeah. In creating what we call the big why, which I know is used in a lot of programs, that concept of the big why. My husband has used that in corporate things. Why are we doing this? It's a good question. Why are we doing this? What I uncovered was all of the things that I really enjoy. I love walking on the beach. I live near the beach. I feel really blessed. I'm out here in the Pacific Northwest on the coast. I enjoy spending time with my daughter, my husband, my friends. We have a really active social life. We have a small home, but we love throwing parties at it. There's just so many things that I love to do that I love so much more than eating junk food, than eating a donut. And especially being diabetic, which I know is an epidemic right now. So I know some of your listeners are struggling with the same thing. Developing type 2 diabetes because of being overweight and my family history meant that down the road at some point I could lose my feet. I already have some numbness in my toes that developed about a decade ago. It hasn't gotten worse because I arrested the problem by losing all that weight. But when the whole thing with my eye went on, it became really real to me. I mean, diabetes for the most part is not a painful disease. At least in the beginning, you don't even really know you have it at all. It was really easy to ignore the obvious and continue eating and enjoying food. And then I realized that in uncovering those things, well, what do I really want? Being slender and looking good in clothes and enjoying a walk on the beach with my husband at sunset or with our dog, I mean, it's so much better than the taste of a donut, which is so temporary. Whatever your junk food is that you like, or any food that you're overeating. I could overeat healthy food. Anytime you're consuming more calories, and especially really junky, empty calories, you're hurting yourself. And we all know that, but it's easy to ignore. And what became impossible to ignore was everything that I was going to have to give up, the rest of my whole life. Like they say that in addiction type behaviors, to recover from that, you're trading the one thing that you like for everything else, everything. You're getting rid of one thing so that you can have everything.
It's very well said.
When you really meditate on that, you start to look at those unhealthy foods and they no longer have any appeal. They look like poison.
That's very well said, and it's very inspiring and touching. What I'd like to add to that is that you don't have to be diabetic to leverage that insight. First of all, diabetes is not the only diet reversible condition, disorder, disease that people struggle with. Secondly, it's not a black and white issue. Every time that you're overloading your system with too much sugar, starch, excitotoxins, salts, oils, acrylamides, all the awful things that we know are out there. I remember Dr. Furman saying, you pay 3 times. You pay the next day with feeling a little hungover from it. Don't have quite the same energy. You're not quite as present. You can't relate to other people in the same way that you normally would. You lose a little bit of your confidence. Sometimes your digestion is off. Sometimes you don't sleep as well because you've got some bile in the back of your throat. So you pay right away. You usually pay with some ailment or disability later in life. And you pay by giving up years that you could have lived. Most people die younger when they do that. And so everybody has to decide how much of a trade-off they're willing to make. I certainly eat more than just dirt and rocks. I eat some things for pleasure, and 98% of what I have is for health, but I eat some things for pleasure. Everybody has to decide they're willing to trade some of that. But I think that we live in a society where people really aren't making informed decisions. We all laugh it off together, everything in moderation, ho, 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 ha, ha, ha. In the meantime, we're all slowly poisoning ourselves. It's like we're committing slow suicide with the food. So you don't have to be a diabetic to take a breath, kind of step back and say, is there some line in the sand that I need to draw more clearly? Do I need to make boundaries about a particular food? I'll only ever have 1 bag of potato chips a week or something like that. Is there something you need to do to make sure that you're not going to have to pay more than you need to or want to those 3 events over the course of your life? So I wanted to ask you said you were investigating weight loss surgery and that you thought it wasn't a good idea from what you were reading, but you were going to do it anyway. Could you tell me what you were reading and why you thought it wasn't a good idea?
Well, first off, weight loss surgery, you're surgically altering a body to simply control something that's completely voluntary. Like our overeating is a voluntary act. Yes, it can be a compulsion, but you are still in control of your hands, bringing the fork to your mouth. And so that idea of surgically altering.
You're sending a message to yourself. And if your doctor says this is the best thing for you, then we can't override it. But you are sending a message to yourself that you're too weak to control it on your own.
Exactly. So is that part, that first element. But secondarily, I had done a lot of reading about people end up with vitamin deficiencies and all kinds of other digestive problems afterwards. There's the very real fact that some people don't survive those surgeries. But then the other thing that kept resonating with me, and even if you watch those TV shows about people getting those surgeries, you see this time and time again, that even post-surgically, they still are constantly losing control. And often people will completely defeat the surgery. They'll initially lose weight and then they start putting it back on. Depending on the mechanics of the surgery that they had, the stomach stretches back out and can hold more than it originally did, or, all kinds of things that end up happening where that weight loss is never complete. They never get down to the weight that was their goal before they start regaining it. And that idea absolutely terrified me, that I would spend a lot of money, risk all kinds of things by having this procedure done, and then not end up with the effect that I wanted anyway. I would think to myself, well, if the whole point of the surgery is to make you consume and absorb less calories, why can't I find a way to just do that on my own? To just start consuming and absorbing less calories, if that's the point of the surgery. So it just seemed to me that the surgery was a physical, mechanical way of correcting really the way a person is thinking. And shouldn't we be taking a more psychological approach if the problem is the way they're thinking?
I gotcha.
So I was kind of ripe for getting a hold of your book, being that it is indeed a more psychological approach.
For legal reasons, I can't say an awful lot more about what I'd recommend or not. I will say that there have been bariatric surgery clinics that are giving away my book to their clients before surgery. I appreciate. And then the other thing I'll say is that there are people who've done this already, and that because there is a reasonably high recidivism rate, you still need to work on your thinking. You still need to be able to figure out how to comply with the diet your doctor gives you. I'd suggest that no matter what you do, you don't solely rely on pills and surgeries and quote unquote treatments to overcome this, that there are very practical ways of organizing your thinking, which don't really require that you unearth all of the pain from your past and overcome all that trauma.
I've had counseling over the years to sort out some of my memories or feelings about my childhood or whatever relationships. And it didn't really help with, with my eating issue. That was still very much there. And it had become like habit more than a response to any stimuli. It was just a habit at that point to overeat, to be excited about food. Me and my friend Meg used to have a joke where we would walk into a party or an event together. And of course, there would be the spread of food out on a table somewhere. And we would look at each other and go, food, my favorite. All of it's good.
That's funny. I don't want to just tease people. I want people to have a sense of the basics. And I want you to know, if you go to defeatyourcravings.com and you sign up for the free reader bonuses, you can hear me actually coaching people through this using the techniques we're talking about. But I'll describe it for you right here. What you need to do is have at least one simple rule that can easily distinguish where the line is. So one of my first rules, Kim, was, I'll never eat chocolate on a weekday again. I was a big chocoholic. When you hear a little thought in your head that suggests that you should have chocolate on a Wednesday, you worked out hard enough, it's not a big deal, one bite's not going to hurt, then you have a mechanism to wake up and say, whoa, I don't eat chocolate on a Wednesday. For me, I called it my inner pig. So I say, that's not me, that's my pig. Chocolate on a Wednesday is pig slop. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. You can call it your monster moaning for mush, whatever you call it. It's a vehicle to draw that line in the sand and wake up. And just wake up and have an opportunity to get yourself back in your right mind. The other parts of the process are to take a few 7-11 breaths, breathe in for a count of 7 and out for a count of 11, which calms you down and signals your brain that there's no emergency. See, overeating is usually in response to a false sense of emergency. It's like the brain thinks it's going to starve, but it's really not. And so taking the moment to pause and breathe like that says there's no emergency. We have everything we need right now. If there was a hungry bear chasing you, you'd be huffing and puffing and huffing and puffing, and you couldn't take the time to breathe out slowly for longer than you breathed in. You'd be going, and then you ask yourself, why does my inner food monster, my pig, my goblin, why does it want me to break my rules and eat the chocolate? Carry around a little smartphone or a piece of paper and you write down exactly why it says you should do that. Oh, come on, one bite won't hurt you, worked out hard enough. Or, you've had a very stressful day and you really deserve it.
You could have this piece of chocolate now and then don't eat any tomorrow.
Right.
That's what my kid would always say. Always it would say
that.
Yeah,
you can make up for it later. Like there's a cleanup crew coming. You write these things down. Writing's an upper brain activity and overeating tends to be a lower brain activity. Writing is more of a cognitive, strategic thing that you do when it's not time to act, when it's time to think. So just the act of writing that down, even if you don't know what the answer is, will help you. And then what you can do is ask yourself, why is the pig wrong? It usually is telling a half truth and a bigger lie. So we already talked about why you can't start tomorrow. That's an example of refuting the idea that you can start tomorrow. But if it says one bite won't hurt, I would say, well, one bite is a tragedy because it's a difference between whether you're in charge or I'm in charge, between whether I'm acting like a slave to my impulses or the master of my own destiny. It's almost never one bite. And we all know that when you take one bite of chocolate, there's a good chance you're going to eat the whole bar. At least that's what it was like for me. Some people can do that. My sister can take 2 little squares of chocolate out of her purse and say, I'm going to save the rest for later. She does. And so you refute what the pig is saying. so that you no longer have the plausible deniability. You no longer have the justification that would allow you to break the rule. You can remember why you committed to the rule in the first place. You ask yourself, why would complying with this rule make me a happier, better person? And I'd set up that rule because I want to be a tall, thin man with energy and presence, and I want to be free of cardiovascular worry, and I want to live a long life hiking mountains and enjoying my nephew and my niece and my pets, and I want to live a life. I want to live. And that's the essence of what you do. There's a lot of other elements that tend to lead to the false perception of emergency in the first place. How well you're nutrifying yourself through the day, how regularly and reliably is food available to you, how well you're sleeping, do you have enough decision-free breaks over the course of the day, do you have some form of connectedness to friends and family and loved ones, or a pet, or some type of a human bond that, or at least the prospect of one, that calms you down at times. All the things we need to do to take care of yourself. And it sounds a little corny, but when you don't do enough of that, it starts to feel like this is an emergency and that food is really the only thing that's going to solve it. Slop. And so that's the essence of what we're talking about. And we help people work on that whole continuum, most notably how to really wake up at that moment of impulse and get yourself those extra moments to make the right choice. Did I leave anything out, Kim?
No, I think the concept that I developed early in the game when I started working with you guys was the idea of having a daily routine where I run through these things. I read my rules to myself, I read my big why, and then I refute. I think of all the things that the pig might want to draw me into today, looking at my day ahead, my plans for the day. It's nice to be able to kind of troubleshoot and have a plan at the start of the day so that then you don't get caught. And that was a huge thing that I learned and developed, this idea of, what do we do for people? This idea of helping them develop all these things, their big why statement, their ability to talk back to the pig's lies, the forming of rules that are actually going to be useful for them to, meet their goals.
So you're talking about doing a lot of this preemptively. I think you call it the 3 R's.
I do. My 3 R's, my reasons, my rules, and to refute.
Reasons, rules, and refutations.
Exactly. I developed a habit of doing it every morning. I think it's interesting. I was just delving into this recently with one of my clients who's been really resistant to any kind of like a daily routine. And she explained to me why, and it actually made sense to me, but it made me look at, why do I love this so much, this routine that I have each morning? And to the point that I really enjoy doing it, and I can't imagine skipping it. Even when I'm on the road, even when I'm really, really busy, I find a way. It's in my phone. I'll read it to myself. But at any rate, my childhood was pretty chaotic. And so I think I crave that organization, that routine and something to really count on. That's been magic to me. Absolute magic.
That's really profound, Kim, actually. I always feel like that routine is sacred. It's as simple as reviewing your reasons for doing what you're doing, reviewing the rules, like exactly where is the bullseye that you're shooting at, then asking your pig, what's its best shot? Why should you break your rules today? And then coming up with refutations for that, which after a while start to repeat, and it doesn't really take much work to know how to do that. But going through those reasons, rules, and refutations just for a couple of minutes in the morning, it's a very grounding practice. It reminds you who you are and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it reminds me of I don't know, children saying the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning, at school, whether you're into that or not, but that purpose of why are we here? Oh, to be good citizens. We're learning to be better citizens or whatever. And also, I don't know, like a mission statement, if you had a big company where they read the mission statement before meetings to remember, what are we doing here?
What's different than a big company? This is your mission statement. This is what you've decided upon, not what was dictated to you or not something you're trying to be inculcated with.
Yeah, you're having an influence on your own self. And that's another thing, too, that I would want people to know about your thinking, your program, what you've created that we're all benefiting by, is the concept of autonomy. I like to use the term, I know it sounds snazzy, autodidact. We're all autodidacts. We teach ourselves. We're teaching ourselves how to do this by experimenting and exploring and understanding what works. And we find out what worked for other people and then play with those concepts to see if that would work for me too. And that kind of thing. But, the concept of autonomy, they're your rules, they're your reasons. Nobody is ever going to tell you what you're supposed to eat or not eat.
I found that largely when I'm supervising coaches, if something's a struggle with a client, it's because the coach feels like the client has to do something the way that the coach thinks they has to do it. And somehow you have to help the coach let go of that, because autonomy is critical for overcoming any addictive pleasure. If you think about it, the opposite of autonomy is dependence. And if you encourage a client to say, well, I'm dependent upon you to be able to eat healthy, then the client is never going to feel strong and capable to take care of themselves. Look, I can't follow you around all day and make sure you eat okay, right? Only you that can decide what to take out of the package and put in your mouth and chew and swallow. Most people who struggle with food can point back in the history to some way in which fed against their best interest or left alone with food too much against their best interest. Most people won't point to a very regular, reliable, nutritious routine in their upbringing, so they kind of had to figure it out for themselves. And what people were telling them to do was not really the best thing to do. I don't know which is more neurotic or chaotic, growing up in the restaurant business or with 17 Jewish psychotherapists like me. But I can tell you that it was really critical for me to be able to come up with my own plan.
It was for me too, and continues to be, because, my rules have evolved over the last few years, as has my reasons, my big why. I tweak it all the time and change things up in it to keep it fresh and interesting, and I'll think of new things. But my rules in particular, they're mine. They're absolutely mine. Nobody can point to them and say, oh, well, you really should cut out such and such, or, oh, gee, maybe it would be okay for you to have a snack each day, or whatever. It's like, no, these are my rules. They're very personal.
The interesting thing that I found is that it's exceptionally rare. In fact, I'd say it's never happened that someone comes to me and abuses that and says, my rule is I'm going to eat nothing but chocolate glazed donuts. That's what I'm going to have for the rest of my life. I'm going to live on chocolate glazed donuts and coffee. I mean, if someone came to me and said that, I might say, well, I do find that people are more successful when they have regular, reliable nutrition. But, 99.9% of people, they've read a lot of books. I encourage people to consult with dietitians and nutritionists and, medical professionals about this. They're not really lacking in the knowledge of what would be healthy to eat. They're lacking in the ability to implement that knowledge. Having permission to create your own rules seems to set them free. The other thing that sets people free is understanding that it usually works better when it's a phased approach. Most people live their life on a feast and famine roller coaster. They're not just good overeaters, but they're good dieters too. And, either they're feasting or they're famining. And when people realize that, gee, if you could just pick one simple rule and go to kindergarten before you go to college and prove to yourself that you've got the ability to pick a rule and follow it, that you really do have that power, it encourages a lot of confidence and enthusiasm. And maybe you're not going to wake up skinny tomorrow, but you're going to wake up with that confidence, and the despair and hopelessness and fear that you're never really going to get this under control, that goes away. And then when you feel confident like that, it's a relatively simple matter, usually just a couple of weeks later, to start adding in some rules for weight loss if you need to lose weight, adding in rules for weight gain if you need to gain weight. Giving people permission to choose their own rules and to set the bar lower so they'll comply with it even if they don't feel like it, and have a sense of success and build an identity around that success, that makes all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to tell people too that this is what makes your program so much different than a lot of others, is this idea of, we're not telling you what to eat. We're not dietitians. It's really none of my business what you eat. I'm going to help you determine what you want to do and then help show you how to do it, how to actually stick with it. There's a lot of diets and programs out there. And, whether you're saying, oh, I'm going to be a vegan, no fat whatsoever, or you go the whole other route and say, I'm going to be keto, and have nothing but protein and fat. It's kind of like the concept that any diet will work to help you lose weight as long as you're reducing the amount you're taking in and maybe exercising or whatever. Nobody really tells you how to stick to it, though. And that's what we're doing.
What I do find is that the more extreme diets are harder to stick to. I kind of wish that for the purpose of overcoming overeating, kind of wish people would drop the plant-based versus carnivore idea I wish people would just focus on whole foods, like eliminating the junk or regulating intake less processed food. I find that people do much better overall.
I found that for me, behavioral rules were better for me than specific food rules. Does that make sense?
Say what you mean. Give us some examples.
Yeah. Well, like my first number one rule that I've been practicing for a few years with your program, I dropped 80 pounds. But the rule was eat 3 meals a day, no snacks. That's simple. Just stop with the snacking, 3 meals a day. And it's interesting because if you look at meals, the concept of, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's regular nutrition. I'm really unlikely to make a meal off of junk food. Like, I'm not going to say that my lunch is 4 donuts and a cupcake. It's like, no, you eat lunch foods at lunch. For whatever reason, that resonated with me enough that I didn't need to cut out specific foods because they naturally got cut out. Chips and donuts are snack foods. And if I'm not eating snacks, then I don't eat those.
Perfect. So you just regulated the behavior rather than any particular food.
Exactly.
Some people will just have rules that support mindfulness. Like I'll always put my fork down between bites. I'll never eat anything without taking a picture of it first. Sometimes just having that pause can make all the difference. Yes, it's up to you. You don't have to have food regulations. And also, if you do have food regulations, they can also focus on adding things rather than taking things away. I know another woman who lost 80 pounds with a rule that said she'd always start her morning with 16 ounces of green goodness. She'd just make a healthy green smoothie every morning. And it just kind of set her mind right for the day. When you focus on adding more healthy food, sometimes that crowds out the unhealthy stuff. Speaking for myself, I find the more healthy food that I eat, the less that I've wanted any of those quote-unquote treats. I stopped really seeing them as treats and started seeing them as punishments.
Yeah, and I think, again, that becomes that your brain doesn't ask for what it never gets kind of thing. And it does start to ask for the stuff it does get. You actually start craving kale, or a salad or whatever.
And nobody has to believe us about that. They just need to try it for a while. There's no way they're going to believe it. Yeah.
No, I know. Oh, well, when I made the rule for myself, and it took me a while to get to that, I had a rule that was 3 meals, only 2 snacks. I mean, I slowly came into this rule. I did not start out there by any stretch. Oh, and I had all sorts of conditional rules about snacking where I could have snacks on certain days of the week or in certain situations. And as I slowly moved towards that rule, it was amazing how suddenly I could do it and it wasn't a big deal. Like that concept of saying, I didn't have a snack last night, and weirdly enough, I didn't even miss it. 2 months ago, I would have thought, oh my God, there's no way. There's no way I'm giving up that. That's such a happy time of the day to sit down with a snack in the evening. And it's just amazing to me, the day.
There is a concept. Some people do better going cold turkey and things, and some people do better with what we call a just noticeable difference. And some people never give up things entirely. Sometimes they just have it a couple of times a week in particular situations or whatever. But there's this concept called the just noticeable difference. I wish I could remember the book that I read it in, but remember the technique was to do with chocolate chip cookies, I think. There was this person that was binging on chocolate chip cookies. And so the coach asked them, well, how many chocolate chip cookies would it take to satisfy you usually in a chocolate chip cookie binge? And she said 20. I got to eat the whole box. I got to eat 20. I think the person said, well, imagine yourself with a plate of 20 chocolate chip cookies in front of you. Now, could you imagine yourself breaking off a half a cookie and throwing it away or leaving it over for later? Could you eat 19 and a half cookies and still be satisfied with the binge? And she said, okay. And so that was the rule.
Wow.
Then you can guess what happened next. You say, well, what about take a whole cookie and put it aside? And I think the end state there was that she would have 2 chocolate chip cookies and call it a day. And that works for people. That works for some people. Kimberly, is there anything else that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? Something else you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I was thinking about my daily morning routine. I wanted to make sure we got that in because it's so cool. It's just a happy spot for me.
When you think back on your youth surviving on tab and cigarettes, do you wonder how you survived?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, yeah. And then when I was raising a child and she got to those ages and she didn't do any of that, thank God. But yeah, I think how many situations I got myself into as a young person that I think most of us are lucky to be alive. So just some of the dumb decisions and silliness and stuff we thought was important and it wasn't.
Okay. Well, the book is called Defeat Your Cravings, and you can find it on the website, defeatyourcravings.com. I'd suggest you click on the free bonuses, the big blue button, and sign up for the free bonuses because you'll get a bunch of good stuff in addition to the book. We've got that set of recorded coaching sessions, so you can hear how this works in practice, so it's not so weird and unusual, wondering why is there this psychologist on who's talking about a pig inside of him. It's actually a very compassionate process that takes people from feeling kind of despairing and scared and powerless over their cravings to feeling hopeful and enthusiastic and positive in just one session. There is a set of food plan starter templates. We talked about starting with one simple rule, but some people want to see how rules are used to support different dietary styles. So we tried to put together a set for all of the different styles we could think of. So there are point counters and calorie counters and macrobiotic and ketogenic and whole foods plant-based people and carnivores. And we tried to put it together for everyone just so you could have some examples. We call them starter templates because I'm not, nor is anybody that works for me, licensed to treat you for any underlying condition, disorder, or disease. So you need to work it out for yourself. It's just examples of what people do. It's all at defeatyourcravings.com. Click the big blue button. And if you're interested in hand-holding and coaching, at the moment as we're publishing this, we have a daily support group program where you can call in via webinar or phone to talk to me or one of our coaches every day of the week. You also get unlimited one-on-one coaching to go along with that if you decide to do that program. That's at defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. It all starts at defeatyourcravings.com. Kimberly, thank you for doing this with me and for all your hard work.
Oh, thanks, Glenn. It was fun.
Thanks.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. If you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.